Hello and welcome. I'm Ijoma Onyato. Tonight, National Assembly passes 2018 Appropriation Bill 7 months after its presentation to the federal lawmakers by President Buhari. Senate President raises an alarm over alleged plot by Inspector General of Police to link him with persons involved in cult-related activities. Police describe statement as an attempt to obstruct justice. Federal government reaffirms resolve to ensure release of remaining Dapchi schoolgirl in Boko Haram captivity. Leah Sharibu says negotiations with Boko Haram ongoing but complex. And US hopes summit between President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will hold, despite threats by Pyongyang to pull out of talks.
On business news tonight, Shell Petroleum Development Company shuts down Transforcados pipeline for repairs. On sports news, Atletico Madrid defeat Olympique Marseille 3-0 to win the UEFA Europa League for the third time.
And from Abuja, Senator representing Kogi West, Dino Melaye, gets bail on health ground after 3 weeks in police custody over alleged illegal firearms possession and other charges.
We begin tonight with the passage of the 2018 Appropriation Bill into law by the National Assembly about 7 months after it was proposed by the President. The two chambers approved a budget of 9.12 trillion naira as against the 8.6 trillion presented by the President on November the 7th, 2017. The lawmakers say they approved the increase after due consultation with the executive. The oil benchmark price was increased from $45 to $51, and the additional 508 billion naira added to the budget was applied in critical sectors of the economy. Our correspondent Linda Akigbe reports.
Six months after the 2018 budget was presented to the National Assembly by President Muhammadu Buhari, the budget is eventually passed by both the Senate and House of Representatives. Coincidentally, in the same month, the 2017 budget was passed. The House of Representatives, however, made amendments to some of the clauses in the budget.
Clause 1, part 3 is saying that no part of the amount aforesaid shall be released from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation after the end of the year mentioned in subsection 1 of this section. And subsection 1 says that it ends by December 31st, 2018, which is in conflict with clause 11.
We should include only, so that it will read, the Minister of Finance shall ensure that only funds appropriated under this Act are released to the appropriate agencies.
And the issue of subsidy payments is not left out, even though it is not mentioned anywhere in the budget.
So if the executive is still paying subsidy, it will appear that they will have to come by way of a supplementary budget for that, because there was no request.
And for the first time, the National Assembly, in consultation with the executive, decided to implement the National Health Act, which provides that at least 1% of the amount in the Consolidation Revenue Fund should be devoted to health services.
A breakdown of the budget shows that of the 9.1 trillion naira total expenditure, recurrent expenditure is 3.5 trillion naira, capital expenditure is 2.87 trillion naira, debt service is 2.2 trillion naira, and statutory transfers of 530.4 billion naira. At the end of plenary, the House Committee Chairman on Media and Public Affairs explains the reason for the increase in the budget from 8.6 trillion naira to 9.1 trillion naira.
Because we have an increase in the benchmark to 51 USD dollar to a barrel. So we have a reduction of deficit of 50.88 billion. In security, there was this increase of 46.72 billion. Security generally. Health, we have 57.15 billion. Power, works and housing, 106.50 billion.
Although the 2018 budget has been passed, one matter which will eventually have to be sorted out is the $496 million for the purchase of a Tucano aircraft, which the chairman, Senate Committee on Appropriation, says would have to come as a supplementary bill. Linda Akibe, Channels Television News.
The 2018 budget of 9.12 trillion naira is 22% higher than the amount presented by President Muhammadu Buhari, and its passage is just a precursor to the assent by the president. In this report, Channel's business correspondent Temple Ashaju takes a look at some of the events leading to today's decision by the National Assembly.
The budget passage by Nigeria's National Assembly comes 3 days after the Minister of Finance, Mrs. Kemi Adeosun, hinted of government's plans to close the 2017 budget soon. The historic 9.12 trillion naira or $29.8 billion is the highest since Nigeria's independence. It's also 22% higher than the 8.6 trillion naira spending plan initially presented by President Muhammadu Buhari. The lawmakers attribute the increase to oil price assumption of $51 per barrel and an expectation of crude oil production at 2.3 million barrels per day based on an exchange rate of 305 naira per dollar. The budget passage is not the ultimate step to implementation. The next phase is the signing into law by President Buhari, who is likely to question the difference. Budgets under President Buhari are known to be huge but underscored with low performance in execution, in spite of a 1.5 trillion naira success recorded for the 2017 fiscal year. With a broadening tax net strategy and rising crude oil price, the much-anticipated 2018 budget is expected to be more productive. Temple Ashaju, Channels Television News.
Now let's take a closer look at all this. I'm now being joined on the News at 10 by an economist, Mr. Gabriel Idahosa. Thanks a lot for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you.
Now we have the budget passed almost in the middle of the year, at a time when this administration was talking about, getting the budget calendar back on track. What do you think?
Well, it did the exact opposite, if you ask me. We are in May. The year starts in January. So I think we don't even want to talk about it. We just are faced with the fact that this is the last budget that this administration will be able to implement to May next year. So
you mean the last budget before the elections?
Before the elections.
Okay.
And so you can't recover those 5 months that are lost. So you are looking at June this year to May next year. So it is 12 months from next month that this budget can show any performance.
Well, I'm not going to talk about what they could have done better in terms of timing, but let's look at the budget standing at 1.2 trillion naira now. Do you see the president assenting to it quickly, or is he going to pass it back? Are we still going to continue?
Actually, we don't expect him to pass it back because we are already in May, unless, of course, there's a really, really, really strong reason for passing it back. It's more likely, as the National Assembly has said, that they had done this in consultation with the president, and that is likely to let it go, because you lost 5 months already. So I don't see why you want to lose another 1 month of haggling between the two parties.
Do you think this is one of the reasons that the country is not big on execution of the budget? Could that be one of the reasons, or is it just the general way?
Well, it's the way of the last 3 or 4 years. It's not the general way that budgets are run around the world. It's not the way perhaps previous administration have done it exactly. But we have seen that this has been the way in the last 3 years. So perhaps that's the way it is. Okay,
let me just look at some of the criticisms that we have of our budgets, being that the parameters of the budget don't reflect the realities. Looking at, let's say, in our capital expenditure, 3.5 trillion naira, will that do it for infrastructure, looking at the way the country has gone in terms of security, etc.? What do you think?
Well, every year the government has said they will try and move up capital expenditure. This year we are still looking at under 30%. And it hasn't changed. Nothing has changed. There's what the government says it will try to do, and then we see what they do. So there's no real change in terms of the structure of the budget and in terms of what they want to do in specific areas. It is the depth that probably we have more money going to certain things. But the structure of the budget is essentially what we have had. 70% recurrent expenditure, less than 30% capital expenditure, and there's always the aspiration to do more for capital expenditure, but when the numbers come out, it's still the same.
Why?
Well, I think the real pressure on the recurrent side. You have workers' salaries, you have operating expenses that you just cannot avoid, and there's a cap on what revenue that is coming in, whether it's domestic revenue or revenue from oil. So by the time you put the fixed recurrent expenditure on the table, you have very little left for capital expenditure. No matter what government aspires to do, the fact remains that you have to deal with these recurrent expenditures and manage what you have left for capital expenditure. All
right, Gabriel Idahosa, economist, thank you so much for joining us on the news at 10 tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at legal matters. The Senate President, Dr. Bukola Saraki, has raised alarm over an alleged plot by the Inspector General of Police, Ibrahim Idris, to implicate him and the Governor of Kwara State, Abdul Fattah Ahmad. Senator Saraki says the Kwara State Governor informed him that a group of cultists who were to be tried in Kwara State have been transferred to the police headquarters in Abuja on the orders of the IG, and fears that a plot to implicate him is underway.
If there's one public official who has had consistent feuds with the Senate in the 8th Assembly, it is the Inspector General of Police, Mr. Ibrahim Idris.
The Senate therefore view this persistent refusal as a great danger to our democracy.
Just last Wednesday, May 9th, the Senate declared Mr. Idris an enemy of democracy and unfit to hold public office in Nigeria and abroad because of his refusal to appear before the Senate and explain the persistent killings of Nigerians in some states in the country, as well as the alleged mistreatment of Senator Dino Melaye.
I felt that as we speak now,
this time, the Senate President is making some strong allegations against the Inspector General of Police.
My state governor, Governor Abdul Fattah, referred to me the information at his disposal that a group of suspects who had been arrested in our state and who, for cultism, and whose investigation had been completed and were about to under prosecution under state law, and then on the advice of the DPP and Ministry of Justice, were all of a sudden being ordered to be transferred to Abuja this morning. And the information reaching him as he received from the Commissioner of Police that had been directed by the IGP to bring them to Abuja. The information that he has is for them to try how they will alter their statements already made in Lorry and try and implicate the state government, and particularly myself.
Principal officers in the Senate want the matter to be given serious attention.
That issue could be discussed thoroughly and then some resolutions taken before we can go to other issues. I don't think it's something just sweep under your table where you are sitting. I'm sorry, Mr. President.
The Senate President stepped down for the Deputy Senate President to preside because the matter directly involves him.
On Thursday, I was traveling out of this Abuja to Jos. With policemen, I requested legally, legitimately, to escort me through a route that is very dangerous. While getting to Jos in the night, the commander of the mobile in this National Assembly called them and said, withdraw from him and go to the nearest police station and leave him alone. I stopped, I asked, what's the matter? My simple crime is that I told the media that it was wrong for the IG to refuse to appear before us.
But a lawmaker calls for caution.
I think we must learn as elder statesmen in our past experiences. The theatrics is not what we need in this kind of situation.
The Senate eventually sets up a 10-man ad hoc committee to meet with President Buhari over the matter and report the outcome to the Senate next week.
In part 2, after the break, police denies all allegations raised by Senator Saraki. Plus, the Vice President, Oshibaju, rounds off his 2-day visit to Benue State with an assurance of adequate care for persons displaced as a result of farmers and herders' crisis. That's in a moment. Do stay with us.